Good day, folks. This is Bob with the geopolitical news views. Yesterday was another event, I think, fairly equivalent to the nuclear policy deal between Manmohan Singh and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and President Bush. That was the virtual summit of the Quad called by Biden. That's the important part. It was attended by Morrison from Canberra, Biden from Washington DC, Suga from Tokyo, and Prime Minister Modi from New Delhi. What the virtual meeting showed was that the Quad had finally got some legs and a lot of muscle. There was a lot of debate on whether it should be a narrow construct of just maritime domain and maritime security. And most people, analysts in Washington, really wanted that. However, it's important to note that security for all of us now is just beyond physical domain control. It now is technology, it is secure supply chains, it's artificial intelligence, and it's the new developing technology. So I'm glad that when this group got set up, three essential groups got set up. One was, and which are going to have a major impact on India's economy, and this Atmanirbhar. We'll talk about that a little later. But what I want to say is, I was called by Biden. It put to rest debate on priorities which everybody is debating on Washington. Its foreign policy is plain and simple, and it's decided that its clear and present danger and challenger is none, even though unsaid, is none other than China. And this answers the questions put by Kawal Sibal some months ago. What Washington policy on China will be after president election will certainly have an impact on how India will handle China. And I think at this point of time, the way the coalition has been built up after this virtual summit should actually now take away or put all the naysayers in India to bed, bury them for good, and move ahead at a fast pace, because the world has realized that she must be halted. And why should she be halted? She had expected his PLA to achieve its aims in Ladakh by early June, post which he could engage India in unending talks, enabling him to concentrate on regaining Taiwan. Why was Taiwan important? Amalgamation of Taiwan would ensure she is revered for life and worshipped for being foremost leader in Chinese history. And why was that? What gave the global community, this is the important part, community time to get its act together and deploy forces in the SCS was India's staring down the dragon in Ladakh, putting spokes in Xi's plans for Chinese expansionism. China knew that if it escalates in Ladakh, its plans for Taiwan would have to be shelved. Okay? Now, Taiwan could, and remaining silent when Xi invades Taiwan could set in motion events which the world would never be able to control without indulging in a nuclear war. It cannot let another Hitler rise, especially in Asia. And says to support Taiwan and maintain pressure against Chinese expansionism, the US has pushed its carrier group into the South China Sea as a precaution. As global reality begins to dawn, Australia and European powers have announced their intention to join forces to block Chinese expansionism. Simultaneously, economic pressure is pushing China back. She must be checked before another Hitler rises, folks. And this is what the world has finally woken up to. India played a critical role, and what pushed China back was basically two things, the tactical and the Quad. And here's what Arun Prakash says, the cost of a face-off. Clearly, India's swift military response backed by firm political resolve came as an unpleasant surprise to China and influenced its eventual decision to disengage. Possibly loss of pace in Beijing may see some in the party and or the PLA pay the price of miscalculation. But even in the unlikely event that the status quo ante is restored, China's periodic transgressions have imposed costs on India which cannot be, which is obviously true. And this is where what happens is, this is where the Quad comes in, right? And China continues. See, LAC row not whole story of ties, China says. Wang Yi on Sunday reiterated Beijing's position that the border issue was not the whole story of the bilateral relationship, and the two countries need to create enabling conditions to resolve the dispute and move on. And let me just tell this to Wang Yi. He should absolutely not zip up, because this is just such an old playbook they continue. And now I believe the global time, which is run by a bunch of sycophantic nuts of Xi, is going ahead and calling that the BRIC India has now become a liability. And it's time. Actually, I personally think that India really doesn't need to be part of this notorious gang of unpleasant people like Sergei Lavrov and Putin and Xi. India actually is required to burnish the image of these two individuals with megalomaniac dreams, right? Then, so as you know, India-China hold talks to resolve remaining issues in Eastern Ladakh. Obviously, it's not resolved, right? China and there's a top commander from Washington says China hasn't withdrawn from some LAC position, and that's the truth. And so when Anthony says Ladakh disengagement is akin to surrendering to China, says Anthony, well, it's not akin to surrendering, but it all depends on whether we have moved away from the Kailash ranges or not, and that's a mystery at this point in time, right? Now, India is making its moves, right? Defense security, new criteria for trusted sources and products, and then government changes rules to firewall telecom infra from China threat. And this is becoming very important because Airtel and Vodafone are going around clamoring, trying to get Huawei and ZTE back, and that should be stopped. And the other thing India really needs to do is make water a core issue, because Beijing is using that against India. Though one must understand that the 70% of the flow of Brahmaputra actually originates in the tributaries and the monsoons on our side of the border. However, 30% can also have humongous impact on livelihoods on the two lower riparian states like Bangladesh and you got it, India. Right and wrongs of the LAC conflict, as written by this Chinese Minister Wang Yi, says it's upon both countries to jointly maintain peace and tranquility. What he's done, he says again what he's done is put the blame on India. I find these statements are so stupid. Right? The two sides need to help each other succeed instead of undercutting each other, he says. Right? China's bullet train to close to Arunachal Pradesh. Oh, fine, but we are doing our bit. Ladakh to get India's first geothermal power plant, but we really need to get our act together here, right? China hackers targeted NTPC infra just days back, says an outfit from Washington. Then you have Beijing to invest at least 29 billion in Tibet projects. PLA seeks better infra training bases along LAC. And like I said, China is got its back to the wall at this point in time, because things are not hunky-dory, and CPEC is not made out what it's got to be. There's another article showing that the entire Southeast Asian country now have lost faith and trust, and now for first time in 3 to 4 years, actually 6 or the 7 countries that earlier would have said that they would join the Chinese conglomerate grouping are now saying that trust even more, folks. Now, with the world on our side of the history, what we have to learn is, as Uday Bhaskar writes, from 62 to 2020, India's China era. A make-believe frame of reference has guided India on China, leading consistently to mistakes. The received wisdom was that China with Mao, and now it's going to be Xi at the helm, would be managed by high politics and eloquent diplomacy at the United Nations. Not happening, folks. And he said the Prime Minister's office and the Foreign Office were the lead players in shaping and implementing India's China policy, from agreements about the LAC to the Dalai Lama, Taiwan and more. An element of wishful thinking permeated this China policy, which believed that a visible demonstration of Indian good faith to the one China policy and respect for China's core sensitivities would allow the LAC to recede into the background. As part of the appeasement, Delhi lived with the anomaly of Beijing supporting Pakistan in relations to terrorism and undermining India and international for all international. This is what has to stop. And as Claude RP rightly wrote, South Bloc's mistakes will now be corrected by the army. And in that he writes, the most vital concern today is not to lose the advantages gained on the ground at a negotiating table, as it was often happened in the past. So far, nothing has been lost during the 7 rounds of border talks conducted in Ladakh by Lieutenant General Harinder Singh, the commander of the Leh-based 14 Corps. Now the question is, has anything happened subsequent to that? He further says, the recent blitzkrieg from Beijing about a November 1959 LAC is more information war, using some gullible Indian newspapers. Where is the line that Zhou Enlai mentioned on 7th November 59 to Nehru? Is there a map? On what is it based? On a clearly defined watershed? On customary rights of the local gazers? On land or house taxations? No, it is pure Chinese bluff, folks. But there is worse. The MEA has inked several agreements with China, forgetting to define the main object of the accords, the LAC. Folks, and I've always known, folks, that the key elephant in the room that's created problems with China is the Ministry of External Affairs. Right? But what is it that got China to the, as he rightly writes, to the negotiating table? Is this: however, 3 distinct military actions in the last week of August that negated the advantage the Chinese had thought they had gained in surprising the Indian Navy in early May. First, an excellent tactical ISR put in place on the southern bank of Pangong Tso enabled the Indian forces to race to the top of the peaks in the Chushul sector, the moment the PLA showed an aggressive intent. Okay, in a lightning move, well-poised, fit Indian troops raced to the top to occupy tactically important peaks such as Maga Hill, Gurung Hill and Rezangla. The second was putting the T-72 tanks, and almost simultaneously with the action on 29-30th August is an operation that must surely have shaken the confidence of PLA soldiers. Indian infantry troops stealthily moved towards the higher reaches of the ridgeline known as Finger Four from a route that is not visible from the shore of Pangong Tso. And this was the tactical move that we actually should not have given in, and this is what we have to see, because in terms of our military advantage, we had a lot of it, as a lot of analysts in Washington wrote, right? He says, first let's talk about the army. However, this apparent numerical near equivalence with that of Indian regional ground forces is misleading. Even in a war with India, a significant proportion of these forces will be unavailable, reserved either protecting the Russian border or for countering rebellion in Xinjiang and Tibet, says the report. So the army was even Steven. Now let's see what he said about the Air Force. The Air Force. China lacks the redundancy and related force survivability compared to India in the comparative numbers of regional air bases. In sum, India had a stronger regional air position with a larger number of airfields in the east and west. So even if some airfields are down, operations can continue with other locations. PLAF training and experience shortcomings that are now not shared by the IF amplify China's air disadvantage. Recent PLAF, so this was the important, and the other one that we always had an advantage was the Navy, and they continue to do so, right? Indian Navy looks to enhance arsenal in bid to counter China. So it's getting all kinds. It's got those 2 drones, and we're right there, up and center, battling it out with these guys. And you know what we need to know about here, folks, is that given China's psyche, can we take a soft line? And he says that divergence factor is distinguishing. India's Nehruvian peaceniks who had once sworn by Hindi Chini bye-bye, this has spoiled their apple cart with a venom more poisonous than the virus pandemic. Whenever Xi Jinping vowed that not an inch of Chinese territory would be surrendered, the Han lovers in New Delhi would constantly underplay the issue on the excuse that bilateral trade, investment, technology, etc. were more important. And this is, folks, is where we drew the line. Jai Hind.